are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Greg Brown from the National Apartment Association. Thank you for being on our call today. This is a advanced screening of sorts briefing of our legislative issues for the upcoming NAA Capital Conference next month. We have a full team of your MHC policy experts / lobbyists here to give you the briefing on these issues and kind of take you through the narrative on each. This is a great opportunity to get acquainted with these issues. We'll have a second briefing of sorts during the Capitol Conference, but this is your first chance to both hear about the issues and then ask questions when we get to the end of the presentation portion of this webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy Chetty to introduce the team that we'll be presenting today, but also give us an overview of where things stand in Congress.
Thanks, Greg. We're real excited that you're joining us today, and want to, before we get into the specific 3 issues that we're going to ask you to talk to your members of Congress during your Hill visits, I want to kind of give you a brief summary of the current state of play in Washington. As you know, the Republicans had a really good November election day, and they control both the House and the Senate today, with 246 Republicans and 188 Democrats in the House. The leadership in the House stayed the same, with Speaker Boehner, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and Majority Whip Steve Scalise. And one of the things that I think is interesting to note, the Tea Party is a smaller portion of the Republican conference today, and I think there are many that believe that will be a good thing, simply because that may give the Republicans more votes in their conference to move forward with some of the things that they need to get done. In the Senate, there was a big change. The Republicans took control with a 54-46 margin. It's not the 60-vote margin that they need to in the filibuster, or the 2/3 vote to override a veto, but that 54 that the Republicans have does make it again a little perhaps easier for them to, if they can coerce another 6 or 7 or 8 Democrats to vote with them on certain issues, to move forward on some of the issues again that they need to get done. Interestingly, the Senate has already cast more votes this year than it did, I think, in the last Congress. As you know, they certainly have an aggressive agenda. The House and Senate plan to craft and pass a budget resolution, as well as the 12 appropriations bill this Congress. And I heard a statistic the other day that if you were elected to the Senate in year 2008, you have yet to go through a normal budget process where you would actually pass a budget resolution and consider appropriations bills. So with that in mind, Leader McConnell has scheduled the Senate to be in session 39 weeks and working on Fridays as well most of those weeks. And then in the House, they're scheduled to be working 34 weeks with a targeted adjournment of December 18th. In addition to considering the budget resolution and the 12 appropriations bill, Congress has a number of what could be called politically difficult deadlines to meet. You have a Homeland Security Agency funding expiring at the end of this week. You have a debt limit that has to be considered and dealt with. The date on that is March 15th, but Treasury will have some extraordinary measures that they can use to probably push that off to perhaps the spring or the summer. You have the dock fix that has to also be dealt with, a surface transportation expiration of May 31 that has to be dealt with, and the export-import reauthorization bill that has to be dealt with, as well as the U.S. Postal Service solvency and a cybersecurity bill or protection bill that may have to also be considered. With Republicans controlling both the House and the Senate, there is a pressure that they will need to show that they can lead and address these difficult issues. So it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out in the next several months. With the prospects of appropriations bills and authorization bills moving in a Republican-controlled Congress, the apartment industry has a host of issues that we will be following and working on. when I go in to see a member of Congress, I have a typical elevator speech, and I usually start it out with explaining how just about everything that they consider in Washington has the ability to impact the apartment industry, whether it's tax reform, energy mandates versus incentives, telecommunications, immigration, environmental policies. They all have the ability to impact the apartment industry. NMHC and NAA, with our members, have put together a 2015 priorities document, and I hope you'll take the time to review the longer document. In addition to the longer detailed priority document, we prepared a one-pager, kind of a cheat sheet on some of the key issues. This is one of the pieces that will be included in the Leave Behind folder that you'll be taking with you to each of your Hill meetings. Part of the commercial, when I talk to members of Congress, I want to make sure that they understand just how important the apartment industry is to their state, their district, and to their economy. It's pretty impressive when you tell a member that his industry, that this industry houses a third of the population, or 37 million people in the apartment industry. The apartment also is a $1.1 trillion industry for the U.S. economy annually. The state and district sheets that we have prepared for each House and Senate office, which outlines the apartment footprint in their home states and districts, and the list of companies that operate in their states, are the important tools for the members and staff. They are more often the first thing that I pull out in a meeting with members of Congress or their staff, and they help put a face on the apartment industry. In addition to explaining to the staff and the members about our industry, it's also important to explain who both NAA and NMHC are. And so it's important in these meetings that you kind of give them a feel for who our industry, both our associations, represent. And I like to kind of end my presentation for both of when I explain who NAA and NMHC is, that together we are the voice of the apartment industry. So after you've kind of gone through an important explanation of who our industry is and who our associations are, you'll also be getting into 3 specific topics that we've picked for the CapCon issues this year. And they are tax reform, immigration reform, and Section 8. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matthew Berger, who is the Vice President of Tax for NMHC, to explain and to talk a little bit about the tax issues.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. It's great to be here with all of you this afternoon. Tax issues are important to the multifamily industry because firms pay tax when they build, operate, sell, or transfer communities to their heirs. So basically, taxes are paid every step from the ground, basically from the ground up until the property is sold or transferred. Right now, tax reform is all the rage in Washington, D.C., and while it's unclear as to whether a final tax reform bill will be enacted during this session of Congress, what is clear is that everybody is talking about tax reform, and we need to be in the game to make sure that our industry priorities are well represented during the debate. The fact of the matter is even if tax reform isn't enacted during this session of Congress, there are bills that are being drafted and proposals that are being put on paper, and those will endure. There's no such thing as a really new idea in the tax world in Washington, D.C. You keep seeing ideas that have been recycled for years and in some cases decades. So it's important that we're ever vigilant and that our priorities are heard loud and clear. Right now, the state of play is such that the new chairman of the Tax Writing House Ways and Means Committee, Paul Ryan, is talking through tax reform proposals with an administration that is more focused on business tax reform than the House Republicans who are focused on tax reform that would encompass both the individual and business sides of the tax code. More on that in a second. And right now it's unclear as to whether or not that difference can be bridged, in addition to the notion as to whether or not there can be differences can be bridged over how much revenue a revised tax system should raise. In general, Republicans would prefer revenue-neutral tax reform, whereas the administration, I think it's fair to say, would support raising revenues is part of reform, and it's unclear as to whether or not that can be bridged. Meanwhile, on the Senate side, the new chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Orrin Hatch of Utah, has set up 5 working groups who will be reporting back to the full committee by the end of April, and we will see what they come up with and as to whether or not they can reach some consensus on which direction they want to go in a bipartisan manner. It's actually great that y'all are coming into town in the middle of March, because you'll have an opportunity to meet with senators and in particular members of the Senate Finance Committee who are part of these working groups, and it's much better to hear actual people on the ground talk through tax issues than it is Washington lobbyists with their members of Congress. So with all that as a backdrop, we have 5 key tax reform priorities that we'd like for you guys to push as you guys have meetings here in Washington, D.C. Next month. First and foremost, the multifamily industry is dominated by what are known as so-called flow-through entities. Those are S corporations, LLCs, partnerships, and sole proprietorships. And that's in contrast to big multinationals who organize themselves as so-called C corporations. The basic difference between a flow-through entity and a C corporation is that a flow-through entity pays taxes on the individual side of the tax code, whereas a C corporation pays corporate tax. And we want to make sure that because our industry is dominated by these flow-through industries, over 3/4 of multifamily businesses are so-called flow-throughs, that we are not called upon to pay for a corporate rate cut. Everyone in Washington is talking about the notion that American businesses pay the highest corporate tax rate in the world at a statutory rate of 35%, and part of this tax reform discussion is really about lowering that corporate tax rate. And we want to make sure that we're not holding the proverbial bag as that rate comes down. And basically that could happen in one of 2 ways. We could basically be denied credits or deductions, or we could actually be called upon to pay as part of the corporate rate, which would be a double tax because corporate tax cuts are paid at the corporate level and then dividends are paid at the individual level. Our second key priority is maintaining like-kind exchanges. Like-kind exchanges enable property owners to exchange one kind of property for another while deferring any taxable gain. And that really helps owners and developers efficiently allocate capital and keep their money invested in real estate rather than in other assets. And it's absolutely critical for the apartment industry that owners and developers are able to finance their transactions through these like-kind exchanges. Apart from your meetings next March, it's also noteworthy that we are actually setting up meetings in members of Congress's districts on the Finance and Ways and Means Committee for folks to talk through in a relaxed setting how important like-kind exchanges are to the apartment industry. We had a wonderful meeting in Salt Lake City with the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Orrin Hatch, and there's going to be an upcoming meeting in Issaquah, Washington with Dave Riker, who serves on the House Ways and Means Committee. Next, we are keenly interested in retaining the full deductibility of business interest. Right now, business interest is fully deductible under the income tax code, but there are calls to curtail this deduction because people feel that in 2008 and 2009, developers and others in the economy became over-leveraged, and one way to keep people from becoming over-leveraged is to curtail the business interest deduction. This would be devastating for our industry because our folks, because they're organized as pass-throughs, don't issue stock, and if you don't issue stock, there's only one other way to borrow money, to get money, which is to borrow it. In fact, a typical multifamily deal is 65% debt and 35% equity. So I think you can imagine that to the degree that interest is not fully deductible, that's going to increase the cost of investment and therefore curtail investment in apartments, which is particularly significant at a time where we're still building far short of projected capacity. Our next key issue is ensuring that depreciation rules avoid harming real estate. Right now, multifamily buildings are depreciated over a 27.5-year period, which is just about their economic life. We're, in fact, commissioning a brand new study that will confirm that. We hope will confirm that, but the studies that we do have show that the economic life is right around 27.5 years. In addition to depreciation, there's this thing in the tax code that's called depreciation recapture. And when you sell a building, your prior depreciation deductions are recaptured at a 25% rate. So to the degree that depreciation periods are stretched out or depreciation recapture periods are increased, that's also going to increase the cost of investment and make it harder for us to meet the needs of 37 million American households. Last but not least, we are also keenly interested in protecting the low-income housing tax credit, which is a public-private partnership that has led to the creation of 2.7 million units since its inception in 1986. And it's absolutely critical that this tax incentive remain in the code because we have a 5.3 million unit shortage of affordable housing at the moment. And those are our key five priorities as far as tax reform is concerned, and all of them are on the table and under discussion by members of Congress as we speak.
Thank you, Matthew. Greg, do you think we should wait until the end to see if there's any tax, or should we just...
Let's wait to the end. Let's let everybody get through their presentations, and then we'll have plenty of time for people to ask questions.
With that, I'm going to introduce Kimball Ratliff, who is the Director of Government Affairs for NMHC, and he is going to give us a briefing on the immigration issue.
Thank you, Cindy. When the apartment industry thinks about immigration reform, our engagement falls largely into two interests. Those who live in our properties, with an estimated 26% of growth in rental housing in the coming decade coming from immigrants, and those who help build and maintain our properties, with immigrants accounting for an estimated 22% of the construction labor force just last year. Immigration reform stands to greatly benefit the apartment industry and the American economy as a whole if it is done properly. To this end, reform efforts, comprehensive or otherwise, must include an improved ability for employers to certify the legal status of their employees, and as part of this include a safeguard for those employers who use the program in good faith. Also, visa programs that allow the construction industry to look abroad for workers in markets experiencing labor shortages. And then lastly, encouraging foreign investment in American real estate projects. To this end, during the Capitol Conference, we will be discussing three specific pieces of legislation with congressional offices, and we'll briefly walk through each of those. The first is the Legal Workforce Act, introduced by former chairman of Judiciary Committee Lamar Smith from Texas. Last Congress, he had 33 co-sponsors on the bill, and the bill, in broad strokes, is designed to expand the E-Verify system for employers that enables them to verify the legal status of potential employees, and at the same time create strong safe harbors for the program for participants that use it in good faith. This program and the legislation have already been the subject of a very positive hearing this Congress, and Congressman Smith's staff has indicated he will likely introduce this bill, very similar legislation to the bill that he introduced last Congress, between now and CapCon. It was asked earlier that we detail some of the groups that support some of these bills, and so wanted to let everyone know that for this bill in particular, there's a large number of organizations in support, including the Chamber of Commerce, a whole variety of trade associations in real estate and otherwise. And at the hearing held on this bill 2 or 3 weeks ago, the only opposition raised by Democrats was really not with concerns to the validity of the E-Verify program so much as their concerns that House Republicans were getting away from the comprehensive immigration reform strategy that was employed last Congress in the Senate, and instead is looking at moving a series of piecemeal bills. This is important as a distinction because the issues raised were not with the validity or the value of the E-Verify program itself. And I think that that's something that we can expect to hear while we're in offices during CapCon. The second bill, the Immigration and Nationality Act, that was introduced last Congress by Congressman Andy Harris from Maryland, would expand the number of visas provided in the H-2B program. This is a program which allows employers operating in constrained labor markets to bring temporary workers in from abroad. His bill also streamlines some of the burdensome regulatory requirements within this program. Congressman Harris's staff has also indicated to us that he intends to reintroduce this legislation between now and CapCon. And so for the Legal Workforce Act as well as for this bill, once you're here in town, hopefully we will have HR numbers and specific bill text that you can reference in your meetings. Groups supporting Congressman Harris's bill, it's also a very diverse group, including NMHC and NAA, the realtors, the home builders, other real estate groups, but then also groups as far-flung as the American Horse Council and the Crawfish Processors Alliance. So as you can probably imagine, this is a bill that touches a lot of industries. Lastly is the American Entrepreneurship and Investment Act, which has already been introduced this Congress by Congressman Jared Polis of Colorado and Congressman Mark Amodei of Nevada. It's a bipartisan bill designed to expand and make permanent the EB-5 program. This is a program that is designed to attract foreign capital to American real estate projects in exchange for visas. Groups already in support of the program include the Hotel and Lodging Association, the Building Owners and Managers Association, the Home Builders, the Realtors, and the Real Estate Roundtable. This is a program that was also included in the Gang of Eight bill last Congress to be expanded, and it's a program that we are seeing significant interest from multifamily investment today, and industry professionals tell us that multifamily is one of the quickest growing real estate segments for this program today and in the future. So we will be discussing all three of these specific bills, but then more broadly the themes of the importance of immigration reform being designed to benefit the business community, the economy as a whole, and employers when you're meeting with congressional offices.
Thank you, Kimball. And now I'm going to turn to Lisa Blackwell, who is Vice President of Housing Policy, to talk about Section 8.
Thank you, Cindy. As you know, the affordable housing needs of Americans nationwide have never been greater. Strengthening partnerships between public and private sector participants in the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program can help address critical affordable housing needs. Addressing the problems that currently plague the Section 8 program, which prevent property owners and managers from participating, will help ensure that affordable housing needs are met. To help ensure success and further encourage private sector participation, the Section 8 program must be improved upon in the following ways. We need to streamline property inspection requirements, simplify income verification requirements, ensure and continue the voluntary nature of the program, and finally ensure that funding predictability, that Congress funds the programs that they say they're going to address and honor existing contracts. In an effort to provide input on this topic, I would also like to mention that we are seeking your thoughts on a proposed rule from HUD. The overall goal of the rule is to streamline regulatory requirements within the Section 8 program and reduce administrative burdens. Comments are due in early March. If you have recommendations, please forward them to Greg Brown or Carly Simpson. On to the next slide, you'll see that we ask you to address the Section 8 issue with an action item. We're asking that you urge your member of Congress to co-sponsor H.R. 233, the Tenant Income Verification Relief Act of 2015. Current law requires verification based on income at move-in and recertification annually. H.R. 233 would focus verification efforts on residents whose incomes change on an annual basis, while allowing those on fixed income to be reviewed every 3 years. The bill is sponsored by Representatives Congressman Perlmutter from Colorado and Congressman Stivers from Ohio. This is a great issue to lobby on because it more effectively utilizes government resources, but it is also a bipartisan measure. And in an odd twist of fate, this is an issue both supported by the real estate industry and the advocacy community, which rarely happens, so this is pretty exciting. And I'll turn this back over to Cindy.
Just to follow up a little bit on some of what Lisa commented on, I think we've met most recently, Greg and myself, with both the Republican side and the Democratic side on the House Financial Services Committee to talk about how we might move forward with some of these reforms that we're seeking on the Section 8 program. And we're encouraged that there is support from both Democrats and Republicans on doing some of the things that we have long been trying to do for these programs, like the one that Lisa just mentioned, which is streamlining the rent calculations, as well as maybe also increasing project-based Section 8, also solidifying our what they've already put in effect, which is some of the streamlining of the inspection systems, but also codifying that and perhaps improving on it, and several other provisions. So as Lisa said, we're seeking additional information from members about things that you believe would help make the program better, so that we have a willing audience, shall we say, on both the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle for moving ahead with some Section 8 reforms. So in the past, they've tried to do large bills that included controversial issues in them, like the moving to work reforms that are often controversial. So what the committee staff seem to be doing this time is they want to move small bills on suspension calendar, and the suspension calendar is used in the House when you have a non-controversial bipartisan bill. And so we're in talks with both sides that are encouraging. So your visit in March and your support of this Perlmutter-Stivers bill, as well as some of the other reforms that we're pushing on Section 8 will be very helpful. And it'll be great for these folks to hear you talk about those things. I think what you've already received also is both fact sheets and talking points on all three of these issues. And so you'll be hearing more about those, and we hope that you'll take a moment to review those documents and ask us any questions that you might have, or anything that we can verify, or any questions that you think that we can help you with on those. And with that, I'll turn it back to Greg.
Thanks, Cindy. Great presentation from everyone. This is the time for you to ask questions of this group, and I'm going to give you a minute to do that. When I'm going to ask a question of my own of Matthew. In regards to tax reform, Kimball and Lisa talked a little bit about the sort of bipartisan nature of those two issues and some of the bills that we're pursuing for co-sponsorship, et cetera. Are there landmines that the members should be aware of on tax reform? Are there opponents to where we stand on some of these issues, or are there just general sort of tough questions that a member might throw at them in relation to what we're asking for in tax reform?
Sure, Greg, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think in general there's two fault lines on tax reform. And again, those are whether or not reform should be comprehensive or focused just on businesses. There are a lot of members of Congress who I think in their heart of hearts would like to go comprehensive and do both sides of the tax code, but they also see some real problems with the corporate tax base at the moment and our competitiveness. And there is room to potentially do a business-only bill. I have my doubts as to whether or not that can get done at the end of the day, but it's certainly possible. And that's one fault line. The second fault line is with respect to this revenue question again. I would tell you that the President and congressional Democrats would like tax reform to raise additional funds that could be plowed back into, for example, infrastructure or deficit reduction, whereas the Republican members are much more focused on a revenue-neutral package. Getting to our specific issues there, which I think you should be aware of, like-kind exchanges are at risk from both sides of the congressional aisle. The President, in his most recent budget, has proposed to eliminate like-kind exchanges except for $1 million of deferral per year, which for your larger operators may as well be an elimination of a like-kind exchange provision. In addition to that, former House Ways and Means Chairman Camp, who has left the Congress, and former Senate Finance Committee Chairman Max Baucus, who is now representing the nation in Beijing as the U.S. ambassador, both have proposed to completely eliminate like-kind exchanges. So that's a bipartisan proposal, so that one's really at risk. And I would say that it's really sort of real estate's price of entry to tax reform, so we really have to buckle down and make sure we defend it. The business interest deduction, nobody has come out with a proposal just yet, but it's certainly being talked about because of this leverage issue. And then on the depreciation rules, again, the former chairman of the tax writing committees, who are both gone now, both proposed during last Congress to significantly increase the depreciable lives of real property as well as other assets.
So this is it's not necessarily a partisan landmine. It's a substantive landmine based on what was done in the last Congress and sort of the conversation. So that makes it even more important for our members to argue it that way from purely their business experience and the substantive side of things.
That's right. And just another point that I would add to you, Greg, is the tax reform really in Washington, D.C. is about two things. It's about broadening the tax base and and lowering the tax rates. And pretty much that's all it's about. For the real estate industry, though, we're a real cash flow business, so it's not just all about rate. So what the members are looking at, they're looking at every possible tax preference. So they're looking at business interests, they're looking at like-kind exchanges, they're looking at depreciation because they want to plow that revenue back into lower tax rates. And that's just not very good for the multifamily industry.
And I'd like to just make one point. With that, we have joined with several of our other colleagues and industry partners to commission studies both on the like-kind exchange issue as well as on the depreciation issue, making the case that when it comes to real estate, depreciation schedules matter and impact our business as well as like-kind exchanges. As you all know, on the like-kind exchange issue, many industries use that tool, whether it be, if you're an auto fleet or an airplane fleet or art. A lot of people use like-kind exchanges, but we are spending some time and some money to make the case that there is real consequences and real value in maintaining those two issues for the real estate industry. And I don't know, Matthew, if you want to talk about anything else. So yeah, it's about making the case for real estate of how important these issues are for us.
Kimball, I have a question for you. If a member of Congress says, where do you guys stand on border security? What should you recommend our members say?
It's a great question, Greg, and there's any number of very difficult questions that are going to come up over immigration because it's a very difficult issue. If anything comes up in a congressional meeting that's outside of sort of the lanes that we've designed here in these packets, the best thing to do is to steer the conversation back and let the member of Congress know that that's a very challenging and difficult topic that his office is going to be struggling with going forward. However, you are there today, that day, to discuss immigration reform as it relates to the apartment industry exclusively. That's not an issue that we believe relates to our industry, and so what we'd like to discuss instead is Congressman Smith's bill and bring it right back to a topic that is going to be less problematic and more sort of within the area of focus for us in these meetings.
All right, thank you very much for that. Check in with questions that we have. So far we have just one, which is a pretty straightforward question. Will this presentation be available for those not also on the call today? Of course, yes, it will. It'll be on our website, and we'll also be have it available for any of the staff members. If you want to email someone directly, we can get that to you. But yes, you'll have access to this after we're finished today. And as I said earlier, we're going to do a slightly different approach during Capitol Conference. We're actually going to have a mock meeting or a skit, perhaps you might describe it, of an actual meeting with a member of Congress to give you a sense of what the elevator speech version of this would be in an actual meeting in an office. So, but this is you've got all the solid substance with this presentation from these folks today. So it doesn't appear that we have any more questions. So Cindy, unless you all have anything more you want to add.
I don't think so.
Okay, then we're going to.
Looking forward to CapCon.
Absolutely. We have, just so people on the phone know, we're approaching 600 attendees to the conference and 400 people going to the Hill and Lobby Day, which is fantastic. Highest numbers for Lobby Day ever. So a lot of our members are going to be going to the Hill and carrying the message on these issues. So we appreciate your time and attention today. And again, if you have questions, follow up with anybody here, and we're happy to answer questions or get you more information. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.